Good morning, students. This is Sampat Bhadu, Assistant Professor of English, Government College, Sri Dungargarh, Bikaner. Today, we are going to take up and discuss the poem entitled The Second Coming, composed by W. Yeats, William Butler Yeats. William Butler Yeats was born in Dublin in 1805, Ireland. His childhood was spent mainly in London. His father was a painter, and Yeats himself studied art for some time. He became a member of the poetic movement in London in 1890s and was a keen worker in the renaissance of the Irish theatre in the 1900s. By 1925, he was widely recognized as a major poet. He was also a member of the Irish Senate. He died in France in 1939. W. Yeats is considered a dreamer and visionary who was fascinated by folklore, ballad, and the superstitions of the Irish peasantry. To fully appreciate Yeats' poems, one has to be fully conversant with Irish history and mythological stories. Besides, one has to be familiar with Yeats' personal system of thought presented in his book, A Vision. To understand Yeats' poetry, one has to be familiar with his interest in magic, occultism, theosophy, and the complex symbolism which takes on multiple meanings in his poems. Yeats is considered to be a symbolist poet as he made extensive use of symbols to convey different thoughts and meanings in his poems. He received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923 and is widely considered to be one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. The Second Coming, written in 1919, is a major work where Yeats feels that 20 centuries of Christianity are about to give way to an antithetical civilization in which the controlling authority may be cruel and more terrifying. W. Yeats, William Butler Yeats, was an Irish poet. He was a philosopher and a musician. He is considered to be one of the greatest figures of the European poetry. Today, we are going to take up the poem, his famous poem, The Second Coming. Actually, this poem was composed by Yeats in 1919 after the First World War, and earlier it was titled as The Second Birth. In the beginning of the poem, the poet depicts a very apt and appropriate picture of post-war. The World War has left the world in a situation of flux and disorder. There is restlessness, hopelessness, chaos, and anarchy all around. People have lost faith and conviction, and scenes of violent bloodshed have become the hallmark of the day. The line, "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold," portrays the intensity of the prevalent anarchy. The second part of the poem delivers a positive message that these signs of destruction are signaling toward the second coming, that is, the revelation. The poet visualizes a huge shape, sphinx, with a human head and a body of a lion propping out of the spiritus mundi. The gaze of the sphinx is terrifying to behold. Yeats feels that the long era of dominance of Christianity is on the verge of decline, and a ferocious, cruel, and tyrant civilization is in its budding stage. Let's take up the poem. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack of conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. These are the lines derived from the poem The Second Coming, penned by William Butler Yeats. These emotional springs of the poem lie in the mood of despondency generated by the anarchy and violence of the Easter Revolution of 1916, Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 in Russia, and the First World War that occurred from 1914 to 1919. Dear students, these are some of the events, these are some of the groundbreaking incidents in the world history that inspired the poet to compose this poem. The onslaught on traditional values by science and democracy also participated the mood of depression in which this poem was produced. In this depressed mood, the poet predicts that the future of Europe is dismal. Dismal here means disappointing, dark, dismaying. The presiding deity of the coming civilization will be a shape, or that will be a beast with lion body and a head of a man. The poem has two parts of 8 and 14 lines each. In the first part, he describes the disintegration of the Christian civilization. Disintegration means breaking down, breaking apart of the Christian civilization, demolition, destruction of the Christian civilization. Man is so far distanced away from Christ that Christianity has broken down, and anarchy, violence, and disbelief have taken its place. The rulers lack faith, and the rabble are fanatical. The poem opens as if it were in the midst of a vision. The poet sees a widening gyre. Gyre means a circular motion which has the effect of broadening the thing, going round and round, which is going at top speed. The controller is if so far as there is any, cannot control its movement. This is compared with the activity of the falcon, who cannot hear the falconer because of the distance between the two, or because the falcon is at such emotional heat that it refuses to be guided by its master. The result is all round convulsion in which all finer values of life are lost, anarchy is let loose upon the world. The better people are without a sense or commitment, they have no opinions, they are as if it were neutral, while the worst, the undesirable, are the rebel, are full of fanatical passions and exhibit their violent tendencies. Consequently, or resultantly, traditional and aristocratic life and thereby innocence and purity are in danger of extinction. The best, the widest, the aristocratic have lost all faith and conviction. The worst, the masses are fanatical, irrational, and violent. In these lines, poet Yeats refers to the disintegrating state of the world. There is anarchy and lawlessness all around. Therefore, Yeats foresees or forecasts the end of this Christian world of culture and civilization. The blood dimmed tide suggests the great biblical flood that caused havoc. Let's take up the next stanza. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight, a waste of desert sand, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow things, while all about it wind shadows of the indignant desert birds. According to the poet, the second coming is imminent because the Christian civilization has almost run its course of 2000 years. The present cycle of the history is almost over, and a new history is about to begin. The birth of the new civilization may appear to be the ruin of the old. Its values may appear to us monstrous and terrifying. The very thoughts may be a nightmare to us. But this much is sure that a change is in the offing, means the change is going to take place. In these lines, the poet tells us about his feelings that a new revelation is about to come. He thinks that all the anarchy and violence, decadence and disorder implies that a new civilization is about to be born. Just as God incarnated himself in the form of Jesus Christ when the Greco Roman civilization broke down about 2000 years ago. So, also the second coming of God seems to be at hand. Yeats feels that a new avatar, incarnation, or epiphany is near at hand, a new birth of the superhuman in the human form, the second coming of Christ or Antichrist promised in the Bible, and the utterance of the words second coming evoke an image from the spiritus mundi or collective memory, the seed store of all archetypal images which become incarnate as soon as they touch the borders of nature. At once an image appears before the poet's eye and terrifies it out of focus. It rises out of the sandy desert, a vague terror, monstrous of shape, with the head of a man and a body of a lion, like nursing incarnation in Indian mythology, its vague and pitiless gaze fixed upon the sun above and things moving forward, While all about this monster are whirling red shadows of the angry screaming desert birds, symbol of the violent horror embodied in the double shaped monster. Spiritus Mundi here means the collective memory. Let's take up the next stanza. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. These last lines from the second coming describe that. It's a very powerful poem. This poem was born out of the poet's conviction that the Christian civilization was nearing the end of its allotted span of 2000 years. Yeats believed that a new phase, antithetical to the Christian civilization in nature, was about to begin. The conviction arose out of the deepening disintegration of Europe, of which the First World War and the political commotion in Ireland were the explosive symptoms. According to Yeats, the end of an age which always receives the revelation of the character of the next age is represented by the coming of one Gaia to its place of greatest expansion, and of the other to that of its greatest contraction. At the present moment, the life Gaia is sweeping outward, unlike that before the birth of Christ. In the foregoing lines, he says that while thinking of the present condition of the Christian civilization, he has a vision of a strange figure. It is with a lion's body and a man's head. It is walking slowly somewhere in the sands of the desert. Here he says that by virtue of the vision, he has come to know one secret thing. It is that the petrifying sleep of the second incarnation, who was made to sleep like a stone by Christian charity, love, and non violence. These 20 centuries of the Christian civilization has been broken. It has been disturbed to its indignation by a rocking of its cradle. The second prophet is a very violent, beastly figure, now that the hour of its incarnation has come round at last. It is walking stoopingly towards Bethlehem to be born at the second incarnation. The poet implies that its birth is quite near at hand. Its coming into this world will signify the beginning of bestial civilization full of violence, bloodshed, rudeness, and animal instincts and passions. That's all for today, and have a nice day. Tomorrow we will discuss the questions and answers of this poem. Thank you.